fella asked me there the other day on my YouTube channel, underneath the video that I made about returning to a property development that I carried out in Edgerstown back in 2007, 2008. The question was, how do I feel now about the property crash? My answer was, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. To put the comment in context, you have to understand and just go back to my beginnings, as it were. I've made a couple of videos on this channel, on my YouTube channel, and one of them is my origin story, and the other one is to do with, in the last 12 months or so, returning to the property development that broke me basically and changed me completely, changed my career and my life completely when the property market crashed in 2008 and the Celtic Tiger thing came to an end. But to put it in context, in 1986, when I was 23, I started my first business. It was in retailing. It was with my brother Pat, and I was, to say, 23, very green, so was he, but we worked really hard and we did well. We moved on then and sold that and flipped it and moved on. I went to Navan and he went his way, and then I ended up back in Enfield, taking over the family business, buying the family business off my father, who retired. So I was running the petrol station then in Enfield at that time, and that was up to 2006, 2007. So from 1986 to 2006 or 7, I had what appeared to be a relatively uneventful, successful business in retailing. Everything that I touched went okay, not spectacularly well, but went pretty well. And I always did pretty well doing up retail businesses, flipping them, selling them on, developing them, maximizing the turnover and selling at the right time. I did that then from, say, 1986 to 2006 or 2007. That's 20 years, I think. Or is it 1986, 1996, 2006, 20 years or thereabouts. So in 2006, 2007 then, I decided that I wanted a change of lifestyle, because retailing is very difficult in terms of the hours and the time commitment, and it's very difficult in terms of family commitment and so on. And I had 4 kids and wife and 4 kids, so I wanted to change a lifestyle which was reasonable enough. I ended up then, I was always tricking around in property, buying property, flipping it, investing, but I never did any construction or building before. In 2007 or thereabouts, I sold the petrol station in Enfield and put all of my eggs in one basket, that is, in a site in Edgerstown in Longford. That was part of a bigger site, but the main developer was selling off small parts of the site for apartment development, so that he could finance the main site, which was fair enough. And we all the small lads got in, and there was 4 or 5 or 6 of us. We got in and we bought these sites with planning permission for 6 or 8 apartments, and the plan was to build them and sell them on. The problem was that by the time I got building and by the time I was nearly finishing up, the market had turned, the tide was going out, the Celtic Tiger was basically coming to a grinding halt. It was going to crash. If I got 6 more months, I would have been fine. I would have got to sell the apartments and would have probably done all right and at least got my money back, maybe made a small profit, maybe made a big profit if the market didn't tank completely. But the market did tank. The Celtic Tiger came crashing down around about 2008 or thereabouts. The banks went into difficulty, they had no money. The amount of lending and borrowing that had gone on was just obscene, and people like me and bigger fellas than me, the likes of Tony O'Reilly and Sean Quinn and people like that, eventually they all got caught up in property, or in Quinn's case bank shares, whatever, and simply couldn't repay the money. So to put it in context, Tony O'Reilly was one of the wealthiest men in the country at the time and he went bankrupt. Sean Quinn was one of the wealthiest men in the country at the time and he went bankrupt. But my back was then to the wall in 2008 or thereabouts when the market crashed, because at that point I had 8 apartments that I couldn't sell. The market was completely gone. Everything that I had earned up to that point in my life, all of my relatively small success but steady success over 20 years in retailing and in business, all of that was gone. It was on the table for this development. It was a one-off development that I was going with, and it was gone. At that stage then I had a difficult decision to make. I could have, and this is where in answer to the question from the lad the other day on my YouTube channel, how do I feel about it now? I feel it was the best thing that ever happened, because I was forced to make a decision at the time. But before we go on to face or to look at the decision that I made, let's look at the alternative. At the time I could have blamed the banks, I could have blamed the economists, I could have blamed the government, I could have blamed the central bank, I could have blamed the European Central Bank, I could have blamed the general public for not buying my apartments. I could have blamed anybody. The bottom line is, the best decision that I made was to actually accept and take ownership for the decision which I had made and which hadn't worked out. It didn't make me a bad person, it didn't make me an immoral person. It was just a development, an investment that had gone wrong and was gone wrong, and that was it. I had a difficult choice to make, so my back was to the wall. I'd lost everything, and I decided I would go back to college and study law. So that's what I did. Went to Griffith College, did the preparatory course for the Law Society entrance exam, or the FE1 exams. I got in then, I got past the exams, I got into the Law Society, became an apprentice solicitor at the age of 42 or 3 or 4 or something, I'm not sure exactly, and qualified then as a solicitor in 2011 and started my own practice. Now, I could have had a completely different attitude at the time. I could have refused to take ownership of my mistakes. I could have refused to face the reality, and I could have looked around. Yeah, I could have looked around for somebody to blame, be it the government, be it economists, be it the central bank, about this. But I am suggesting to you that if you're facing a crisis in your life in the same way that I was, if you are facing a situation where you may have lost everything, then there's a couple of ways you can go. There's a couple of attitudes you can adopt. You can look for someone to blame, or you can take ownership of your mistake and make the best of it. Look at a plan B or a plan C or a plan D. And that's what I did, and it's worked out. So when the guy asked me the other day on the YouTube channel, on the video where I returned to the development in Longford and the mixed feelings that I had and so on, and the chap asked me on YouTube, what is my view now, or what is my feeling now? My feeling now is that it was the best thing that ever happened to me, simply because the absolute crisis and the wipeout of my capital and the end of my career essentially at the time, that forced me to do something else. And I actually did law then after that, and I was forced to do that. If I wasn't forced into that situation, I might never have done law, and I wouldn't have my own solicitor's practice now, which is going fine, going well. So the bottom line is, you have an attitude that you can adopt, you have a decision to make. You can't deal with or dictate or determine the circumstances which befall you from time to time during your life. But what you can determine, what you can choose, is a good attitude. And if you choose a good attitude, the right attitude, when things go really badly for you, well then maybe you, if like me, you're in a similar situation, maybe you will be able to turn it around. Or you could spend quite a lot of time, like many people have done, looking to blame somebody else, carrying around grudges like clanking chains behind them for the rest of their life, and blaming the banks, or blaming the government, or blaming the EU or the ECB or the central bank or whatever. that type of attitude really hasn't advanced anybody's position very much that I'm aware of. So, that's why I view the Celtic Tiger crash, the going out of the tide on the property market, I view that as probably the best thing that happened to me in my life, certainly in my business life, because it forced me into a path that has worked out pretty well. But I never could have gone on that path or any path if I had spent my time in self-pity and in looking to criticize or blame somebody else. Hope you find this video useful. There's 2 other videos actually before I go that you should have a look at on my channel. One is called My Origin Story, and the other is the one where I returned to the development in Longford after many years. I did it, I think, earlier this year in 2023 or perhaps in 2022. Those videos will give you a flavour for what I'm talking about and how I came to be where I am now, and why I say that the crash of 2008 or thereabouts worked out really well for me, and it was one of the best things that ever happened to me in my life. If you find this video useful, I'd appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up down below. Thanks a lot.